right, we're turning everything on in the back room now, so in just a moment.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our September 12th, 2022 meeting of the Mayor and Council of Princeton, New Jersey. And here we are, live in person, once again. It's been quite a while. So as we go through the meeting tonight, we may stumble once or twice on figuring out how to be live and coordinate a couple things. So everybody please be patient with us, and no big deal if we do stumble a little. We'll figure it out over the next meeting or two. So having said that, Madam Clerk, could we have the meeting statement, please?
Notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the requirement of the Open Public Meetings Act and state regulations governing public meetings, including the time, date, and location of the meeting, and clear and concise instructions to the public for accessing the meeting and making comments. In addition, the agenda and all related materials were posted electronically and made available to the public on Princeton's meeting portal in advance of the meeting.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Here.
Ms. Niedergang?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Newland?
Here.
Mayor Frida?
Here. All right, if we could all rise and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. I would just like to point out that we are going to move item number 2 under the consent agenda, which is Resolution 22334, up into the list of regular resolutions. So that would become number 14 on the list of resolutions. All right, announcements. Okay, and so another thing that's different now with a live meeting, on Zoom I have a screen in front of me, and it's pretty easy when somebody raises a hand for me to say this one, that one, that one. So now I have to do a little bit of this. So I'll get it down pat, hopefully soon, but everybody just be patient, and Leticia is actually going to help me so I don't miss number 14 on the list of resolutions. All right, announcements. Okay, and so another thing that's different now with a live meeting, on Zoom I have a screen in front of me, and it's pretty easy when somebody raises a hand for me to say this one, that one, that one. So now I have to do a little bit of this. So I'll get it
Briefly,
down pat,
good
hopefully
evening,
soon,
everyone.
but everybody
I'm
just
not sure I remember how to
be
do this,
patient,
but
and
I'm going to try.
Leticia is actually going to help me.
So I want to remind everyone that the Princeton Senior Resource Center benefit is this Thursday night at 6 at the beautiful new building on Poor Farm Road. So it's not too late to join us. I think it'll be a great evening. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about our sustainable landscaping initiative. The ban on gas leaf blowers is ending on September 30th. And that will mean that you'll hear quite a bit more noise in Princeton. I'd encourage you personally to think about alternative ways that you can take care of your property that does not involve the use of gas leaf blowers. If you use a landscaper, please talk to them about this. If you do it yourself, you can use a mulching mower. You can take other steps towards reducing your impact on the environment and on the quality of the air we breathe. So urge you all to do that, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Other council announcements. Let's go Michelle, David, and then we'll work down this side.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So just briefly, I want to announce that the Princeton Business Partnership has hired the first executive director. His name is Isaac Kremer, and I just very excited to announce this. He has over 2 decades of experience working with the Metuchen Downtown Alliance, with Main Street America, historic preservation organizations in Michigan, New York, Texas, Kentucky, and also in New Jersey. So he'll be leaving his post, and he'll be starting here in Princeton October 1st. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's
David?
2 quick committee reports, just for the pedestrian bike
advisory committee, we're actually, we had a resignation, so we're actually down 2 members, and I just wanted to mention it in case anybody who's listening is interested in serving on that. There are applications for our boards and commissions on the website. You can download that and fill it in and submit it. And then I also wanted to mention a couple of things that are going on with the Flood and Storm Committee, Flood and Stormwater. We are in the process of final review for a stormwater mitigation plan for the town. And just to fill people in on what that is, it's basically a way to, when people come with applications for development and they are unable to meet the requirements of our stormwater ordinance on their site, this plan identifies the mechanisms and even possible locations for doing stormwater mitigation off-site in lieu of doing it on-site. So it's a pretty interesting document, at least to stormwater nerds, and I want people to be aware that that's in the works. And the other interesting thing that Commission is working on is we've started working with a consultant to develop a feasibility study for a stormwater utility. And I've already talked 3 times as long as my council colleagues, so I'll leave it at that. But if you're curious about what a stormwater utility is, I'd be happy to answer questions after the meeting.
Thank you, David. Council on this side?
I have,
Leticia?
thank you. So on behalf of Human Services, I wanted to announce that as Princeton being a member of Welcoming America, starting on September 9th and going through the 18th, there's a series of community events that are being co-sponsored with the public library and other community partners. And they include, for the library, there's a multicultural recipe sharing opportunity for our residents to share their recipes and their customs. And it's all online on the library's website. And also there's going to be on Friday, this coming Friday, a Dancing Under the Stars event at Heinz Plaza, where there's going to be a multicultural dance demonstration, salsa, bachata, and also from other cultures. There's a demonstration, plus also encouraging everyone to join in after they learn a few steps. But there's several events. They're listed on the Human Services website. There's a calendar of events, and I encourage everyone to participate in at least one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mia?
I just want to give Deanna or Jim, do you have any updates that you'd like to provide us with on construction or anything that you think the public should know? Sorry to put you on the spot, but this is a great opportunity.
Thank you, Mia. I'll just give an update regarding solid waste. Many of you, I hope, have received a postcard from the municipality of Princeton. Our current trash contract for collection is expiring at the end of January in 2023. So we are out to bid for a new hauler. As part of our sustainability efforts, we are including a provision to start town-wide organics collection as well as part of our trash hauling contract. Bids will be received by Princeton in mid-October, and we will review all of the bids received and bring them to a council meeting at the end of October. So at that point, we will be able to provide more information as to whether or not the organics component of the garbage collection contract will move ahead or not. So please stay tuned. We do have a website and we do have a newsletter to keep people updated. Check us out on the municipal website. Jim, do you have anything on construction?
Just an update on construction. As you all know, there's a couple of projects going on in the Central Business District. Despite a number of delays, the Witherspoon Street project is on schedule, and I'll report a little bit more on that when I do the parking update in a bit, the work session. The Chambers Street, the project on Chambers Street, which is the new Graduate Hotel, is also on schedule. So rest assured, the contractors are moving along as diligently and efficiently as possible, and hope to be out of our hair as right on time. And that's all I have.
Thank you both. Mia, did you have anything else? Leighton, anything for you? Okay. All right, usually we do council announcements and reports, and then afterwards we do staff. Bernie, anything from your end? Okay, anybody? Well, you two already went, Jeff, okay. I just also want to make sure that we thank all the staff and all the time that went into the trial runs to make this work, all the effort by everyone related to our IT world, staff and consultants, to put together a lot of technology, replace a lot of technology in this room. So there was a lot of time and effort to make tonight actually not only happen, but be successful. So a lot happens behind the scenes. So a thank you to everybody involved in that. Okay, we're going to do public announcements for items not on the agenda. And what we'll do is people here first, and then we'll try to do the people on Zoom and see how that all works out. And Lisa Wu, I think you had signed up. If you could come up to the microphone and just let me just give you the general ground rules for everybody, people here and people listening on Zoom. There's a 3-minute time limit. In theory, when you start talking, a timer should pop up here that counts down from 3 minutes. And again, these are for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to talk about something that's on the agenda, you just wait till we get to that item. So please, go ahead. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Ms. Wu, for expressing your concerns. I just want to say a couple of things real quick. First of all, the Senior Resource Center has programming, still has programming at Suzanne Patterson. They have programming at, the facility on Poor Farm Road, and they still have a lot of virtual programming. But if you want, I can put you in touch with someone there for you to have a forum to express these concerns. Also just want to add that the COVID testing site at the Y is completely private. That's not, the municipality has nothing to do with that, and that's an excellent point that you make, but that you might want to bring that up at the Y. That's it, thanks.
Thanks, Eve. Okay, Leighton?
Hi, Ms. Wu. I'm the liaison to the Princeton Senior Resource Center. I know the people well, and I understand fully what you mean by accessibility. Poor Farm Road is a little further out, but however, I want you to understand and know that there is transportation to and from Poor Farm Road from the interior of Princeton. And I would, talk to you offline to give you that information and to also put you in touch with Drew, who I am sure will work with you to address the issues that you brought up tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, so now here we're going to test our technology. On the screen, I cannot see if we have people from out in the Zoom world that have raised their hands. So I'm hoping Adam sitting in the back room. Adam, if we have somebody with their hand up, can you magically make them appear so we could, if we have anybody. And if we don't, let me know, and then we'll move on. But there is a hand up. Okay. All right, so Adam, you're going to bring Adam in? Right, because the person with their hand up is named Adam also, as it would, of course.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello, this is Adam Welch from the Arts Council of Princeton. How's it going down there?
Always good here.
All right. I just was going to chime in and thank you all very much for all of the effort you went through to make sure that we could Zoom in from out of town. I really, really appreciate it. It's a great service that you've approved here. I also wanted to thank the municipality for all the attention that they've been paying to the businesses and support during this period of construction. I know it's been a headache for everyone, but I feel that you all have been paying attention to the requests and needs the best you can, and I very much appreciate that, and I'm sure the town does as well. So thank you all very much for your commitment, and that's it. Oh, I also wanted to say that I can hear all of you perfectly, but I know you're looking at the time. It's only been a minute, but we could not hear the public comment through the Zoom. That's it.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, to our Adam in the back room. Adam, is there anybody else with a hand up? Anybody else out there participating by Zoom that has a comment? Okay. All right, seeing no other hands up, we'll move on from public comments for items not on the agenda, and we're going to go to our first presentation, 2021 Healthy Town Designation for Princeton Mayor's Wellness Campaign, presented by the New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Mayor Frida and Council, for having me here today. I'm Julie DeSimone. I am the Program Officer for the Mayor's Wellness Campaign at the New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute. And for those of you who may not know, the Mayor's Wellness Campaign is a statewide community health initiative which aims to provide community leaders like yourselves with tools and strategies to improve the health and wellness of our communities. Each year, we invite our community partners to apply to have your towns designated as a New Jersey Healthy Town. It's a competitive process that highlights the hard work of all of our local municipalities across the state. And so I'm excited to be here today to present Mayor Frida and their team with the 2021 Healthy Town Award. Princeton is receiving a Healthy Town Up-and-Coming designation for the second year in a row. The Mayor's Wellness Campaign is closely aligned with the town's health department and has worked diligently over the last 2 years to address the health concerns of the pandemic. So this included a COVID-19 community health needs assessment, testing, contact tracing, and vaccine efforts, and programs to address the social isolation that residents experienced during the height of the pandemic. So I want to thank Mayor Frida and Jeff Grosser and your team for the dedication to this work and congratulate you all on the 2021 Healthy Town designation, and we look forward to our continued partnership. And I have your plaque, which I know you received previously, but I had to have something to hold here, so Jeff stuck it to me later.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so the clerk did remind me, thank you, that before we moved on from items not on the agenda, I should have asked one more time if there was anyone here in the audience who had not signed up but wanted to step forward and speak to something that's not on the agenda. Okay. Seeing no one, we will now continue to move on. And just to Adam in the back room, when we're doing the presentations, we don't have to run the timer. We give him a little more than 3 minutes. We'll give him about 4. Okay, so I think next up is our first work session item, parking regulation recommendations for Witherspoon Street, Nassau Street to Paul Robeson Place, and electric vehicle charging spaces at 400 Witherspoon Street Municipal Parking Yard. And Jim, I believe you're up for that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you very much this evening. We're waiting for the technology. There we go. I'm here to speak this evening about the parking on Witherspoon Street, particularly in the section that is currently under construction between Nassau Street and Paul Robeson Place. And I'll also be speaking about the EV charging that we'll be implementing soon at the municipal building. First of all, as I said earlier, despite several delays and difficulties, our contractor, Earl Asphalt, is on schedule, and their schedule has them completing the section of Witherspoon Street between Nassau Street and Spring Street by the end of October, so that street will be completely open to traffic and pedestrians in time for the holiday season. They will not be working over the winter, so they'll be completely out of our way while all the shopping and revelry takes place during all of the holidays. So I want to talk about the service lane usage first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the parking between Spring Street and Paul Robeson Place. And then I'll talk about EV charging and the rate structure that we're recommending here at 400 Witherspoon Street. So first of all, as many of you know, the section between Nassau Street and Spring Street on Witherspoon Street will be one-way northbound with a single 12-foot wide travel lane and a 10-foot service lane. That 10-foot service lane is intended to be multi-use and flexible, but it does need an ordinance in order to establish rules for parking and loading in particular. We have looked at the businesses in the area, and several of them have responded to us regarding their typical loading hours. And what you see up on our screen is that we're recommending that the service lane, the 10-foot service lane on the west side of Witherspoon Street, be designated for loading only during the day from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. On the weekdays, 7 a.m. to noon on Saturdays, and no loading on Sundays. When loading is, when it's not a loading zone, we're recommending that it be metered parking. It will not have meters. It will be a kiosk that will be located in one location so that you pay by your license plate. Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Friday night, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Saturday, noon to 9 p.m. and Sunday 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. There is no parking in Princeton on the streets downtown between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., so there would be free parking from, on the weekdays, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturdays, and, of course, Sunday, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I believe you might want me, since this is a work session, you might want me to stop right here so we can discuss this. So I believe Ms. Perona-Lambros has a few comments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim, Deanna, and the team. It's really amazing. I didn't realize how quickly this was going to get done, and neither did the business community. So everyone's really excited that we're talking about ordinance already and that we're looking at the end of October, certainly before the holidays, to have the paving done. So thank you so much. I do have some comments. The Princeton Business Partnership, now that it's off the ground and running, they would like to come back with some recommendations because there is a really strong desire amongst the business community and I think the community in general to limit the amount of delivery time to before 12. So that would be Monday through Friday before 12 and then turn it to parking sooner. So we really just need to work together. There are a few businesses that have some issues with that, but I think there's workarounds. Jim's gracious enough to come out and we have some meetings set up. So in the next week or so, we're going to work really expeditiously with the PBP and those businesses on Witherspoon Street to try and resolve those issues so we could squeeze down to 7 a.m. or even maybe 6 a.m. to 12 noon for the delivery. And then also maybe come back and talk about whether they want 30 minutes, 1 hour, or 3 hours, because there's also seemingly a big desire to have just a short-term parking option, for kind of the quick, jump in, pick up, a cup of coffee or your pizza at Jules, and, and then, so, maybe not longer-term parking. So if, council and the public will allow another week or so, that's kind of where the business community's kind of what their thinking is. And I think that is pretty aligned with what our thinking was when we developed this plan. So I'll just open it up to questions.
Okay, so I think we have, Eve, I think did you have your hand up also? I know David did. I know one of you did. I wasn't sure who. Sorry. Okay, David.
Yeah, I guess it was more of a question than a comment, but it related very much to what Michelle was just saying. I was curious, in arriving at the suggested afternoon delivery, service loading use for these spaces, was there a type of use that you thought needed to happen in the afternoon?
No, Mr. Cohen, not necessarily. There were some businesses that said that they do get deliveries up as late as 5 p.m. One business actually said they get deliveries sometimes after 6 p.m., but we thought 5 p.m. was probably reasonable. 12 noon is probably reasonable as well if the businesses are willing to accommodate that.
Thanks.
Other questions so far? Yeah, I would, oh, go ahead, Eve, fine.
I do have a quick question. Jim and I talked about this a little bit earlier. How many spots might we be talking about in this section?
Well, there won't be any delineated parking spaces, but there is room to accommodate 12 cars.
12 cars, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that, both my colleagues have raised good points that this is a lot of real estate to just hold on to have available for the occasional delivery. So I definitely think if we can, contain that delivery sprawl, so to speak, to a narrower window of time and allow those spots to be used, for people who want to shop downtown, I think that would be a great idea. So support that.
David.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question based on what you were saying. So no delineated parking spaces, does that mean that you were thinking of doing kiosk pay rather than meter pay? Okay,
Yes.
and that might be a reason that would make it difficult to do a range of parking times, 30 minutes versus 3 hours. So we might have to decide it's either 30 minutes or 3 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour, whatever we decide. But if it's, and I really like the idea of keeping the meters out of there for the visual, and I think the kiosk is the right way to go.
Yes, the plan is to have a kiosk.
Okay.
I'd also like to point out one quick thing is that you cannot park within 25 feet of a crosswalk. So as Mr. Cohen knows, we discussed it at PBAC the other night about potentially putting in bike racks in those 25-foot spaces to truly show that there's no parking in those areas. But that's again, flexible space that has to be discussed and determined.
Okay. All right, so it seems we're all fine with, Leighton, go ahead.
Just one question, Jim. Has there been any thought maybe to taking one, possibly two of the parking places away in terms of putting bike and scooter areas for parking?
As I just said, within 25 feet of both of the crosswalks, there is no parking, and the discussion is that we possibly put in those areas the bike and scooter parking.
Okay, thank you.
One other thought is that we expand the bicycle parking in the two-lane yard alley as well. There are a few parallel parking spaces in that area, but it's clear to anyone who walks down Nassau Street and Witherspoon Street that there's not sufficient bicycle parking.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to, so far, we're good with the Princeton Business Partnership, trying to give us some advice on this also. Jim, are there handicap spots somewhere on their street, or?
Sorry? Are there any what? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Are there handicap parking spaces somewhere?
There is a handicap parking space in the two-lane yard alley, the driveway.
Okay.
And we will maintain that no matter what we do.
Thank you.
Anything else on this?
Keep going.
Okay. The next phase is down by the library in Heinz Plaza and across the street at Mistral and Elements. We have planned metered parking spaces on both sides of the road. There'll be 6 metered parking spaces adjacent to the library and 3 metered parking spaces adjacent to the restaurants and retail on the other side of the street. We're proposing 3-hour metered parking there as well. Again, same hours, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Weekdays, Friday, Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Sundays. I don't think that's very controversial.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Eve, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear what the reasoning was to do 3 hours there rather than a shorter time. I know we're trying to keep things simple, but I do feel like everything I understand about parking is that you want to keep, those high priority, really close to everything, parking spaces available, and you don't want that to be where people are doing their, I'm gonna, go sit in a coffee shop for 3 hours. So, but I'm sure, I know you've really been in the weeds about this, so maybe you could explain what the thinking was there.
The 3 hours proposed to be in keeping with the rest of the central business district. Currently, we have 3-hour metered parking on street as well as 30-minute spaces. So the idea here is if we have less parking in the southern portion of Witherspoon Street because of the loading activity that then switches over to parking later on, that these northern parking spaces could carry some of the demand that existed prior to the project for the 3-hour parking. It would, like I said, it's consistent with what's in Palmer Square, on Whole Fish, the surrounding roadways. During COVID, we did change the metered spaces on Spring Street to 30 minute. So we could look at, maybe shifting some 3-hour spaces back onto Spring Street and putting some 30-minute spaces over here. That is possible. Yeah.
Michelle?
And if I can just add in, I'd like to also have the PBP discuss this when they're meeting, because possibly one option would be for those businesses that need to take those afternoon deliveries. Maybe there could be a loading space designated in this area that could be for, designated forever. And so that would be one option. And then I'd also like to just run it by them. Maybe they want to do 30 minutes or 1 hour as well. I mean, just because it's 3 hours doesn't mean people will park there for 3 hours, but it might be better for quicker turnover to have some shorter time frames there. So I'd like to come back and, talk again with council and engineering about what the PBP would like to see, if that's all right. Thanks.
That's fine. And that works with our schedule, because what our proposal is that we will come back to council at the next meeting with a proposed ordinance for both of these areas for introduction. So we can work out these details with the business community, and you can have the ordinance to introduce and have a public hearing 2 weeks later.
Right, I would say, though, there's probably no great rush to introduce the ordinance at the next meeting, even if it slipped to the following meeting, because the spaces won't be available for months. So it's not like there's an artificial amount of pressure on us to accomplish this immediately. So if we need a little more time, it should be okay.
We will have the spaces available between Nassau and Spring in November. So we would be looking to have an ordinance adopted by the end of October.
Okay. So
Well, and I will also say that the schedule does have them finishing this part of the street by Thanksgiving as well.
Okay.
So it is important that we have this ordinance.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that we don't, let's
Yeah,
get,
we'll make sure we get it
let's
right.
make sure we get all the
Yes.
input before
Yes.
I don't want to do an ordinance and then we have to change the ordinance. Late.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to chime in again on the 3-hour metered parking places, because it seems to me if I'm coming to Princeton to shop and I'm going to be here for 3 hours, why wouldn't we want to push people into the parking garage as opposed to on the streets? Why wouldn't we want to give less time on Nassau Street in the Central Business District to churn cars for movement? Just seems like that would make more sense. Thanks.
David?
I'll just remind folks that this was litigated passionately. I think in 2018, my first year on council, so Leticia, I'm sure, remembers it as well. The system, when it was introduced, did have shorter term parking in the Central Business District and 3-hour parking elsewhere. And the merchant community at that time was extremely strenuously opposed to having it be less than 3 hours. So, we're not bound by decisions other councils made, but I just wanted to give a little history.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Mia?
Thank you for sharing that, David. I think we should let bygones be bygones and focus on moving forward. Without getting into all the details, I basically agree with the big picture here is we want as many spaces as possible for short-term, getting in and out, and also some constraints, as many constraints as possible on the loading, both in terms of timing and space. That's just, the framework I think we should be working within.
Okay, so Michelle, sorry. All right, Michelle, you're getting all this, so for whenever this meeting with the Princeton Business Partnership is, we can make sure they address all these different
Yes, I do.
questions that are coming up.
Thank you. I know the feedback is really important.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, and I think you'll find that I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think the general feeling is very much in line with what we're talking about, so. But, well, more to come.
More to
So,
come.
To be continued. Thank you.
All right, anything else on this slide? Next.
Okay, finally, as council has already approved some plug-in hybrids for purchase for municipal fleet, and as we're moving closer and closer to having electric vehicles in our own fleet, and more electric vehicles are being registered in the state of New Jersey and in Princeton in particular, we do have a need to add some EV charging stations, both for our use and for the public use. So we have contracted and have been told by the contractor, who's already been authorized to proceed, that hopefully by the end of the month, we will have 8 EV charging stations, 4 dual port charging stations, level 2, in the 400 Witherspoon Street parking lot right out here, adjacent to Witherspoon Street itself, the first 8 spaces away from our building. The proposed EV charging rate is identical to the charging rate for EV charging in the parking garage. Of course, if you are charging in the parking garage, you're also paying a fee to be in the parking garage. There is no fee to park here on the Witherspoon Street lot. So we are proposing just to hold the line with the same charging rate per hour. First hour would be during the day between 8 a.m. and noon, 8 a.m. and midnight, would be $1.50, another $1.50 for the next hour, so it's $3 for 2 hours, $5.50 for 3 hours, $8 for 4 hours, and typically a level 2 charge shouldn't take more than 4 hours, so we would up the ante a little bit so that people will move their vehicles and allow for another EV to park there at $10 an hour after 4 hours. After midnight and until 8 a.m., it would only cost $1 to charge for the entire night. That's our proposed charging rate table, which is identical.
I'm sorry. Oh, please go ahead.
And I'm not sure if I've asked this before, but I wonder whether we provide charging stations for electric bicycles anywhere in the municipality.
We do not. It's my understanding that e-bikes and e-scooters plug into a normal electrical outlet, so there's no. But we haven't yet started looking at stations throughout town for that. I know maybe that might be a recreation thing where we could put them in the parks. I have seen them in other places. We have not started thinking about that.
Because I do see more and more in town, and so I wonder if it's something that we could consider making available to the public.
I think we could take that under consideration with our Infrastructure and Operations Committee in discussions.
Thank you.
David has a.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. A lot of e-bikes, the batteries are detachable, and people actually will bring them inside to charge them while they're parked wherever. But not all batteries are detachable, so I agree it's a good idea to look at putting that in conjunction with our permanent, bike parking.
Michelle.
Okay, thank you for this. So I understand the 8 to 12. So probably the maximum would be 4 hours to fully charge an EV. So you're really charging for the additional parking at $10 an hour, essentially. But I'm not really following why it would be so inexpensive overnight, because wouldn't we want to reserve those spaces for our own vehicles overnight, so they're charging? So why would we have it so inexpensive for overnight for other patrons?
The thinking behind that is that, yes, we probably will be taking up all the spaces, but we need a rate to charge for every hour. It's the way the system works. And anyone that does park there and is fortunate enough to get a space to park their public vehicle there and charge, it would be rather inconvenient to ask them to come back at 4 o'clock in the morning to move the vehicle. So we don't anticipate that it's going to be used in that way. And it's not really a revenue generator. It's that the charging stations will more than likely be occupied by our own vehicles.
I'd just be concerned that if you have such an inexpensive rate, someone who doesn't maybe have a parking space or doesn't have a permit, needs a place to park, might, just use that dollar rate to park overnight. So it's just, I would be concerned about that, especially if we're going to need them for our own. I mean, maybe just not allow overnight parking at all, unless, so that way it's just open to our own vehicles. It's just a thought.
David has a comment.
I just wanted to chime in about the complexities of public parking overnight. I know I've spoken to at least one resident of one of our affordable housing developments who does have an EV, and right now she's stringing an extension cord from inside her house to do level 1 charging, or level 3 charging, I guess it is, trickle charge. It's really not an effective way to charge an EV. And what people have to realize is that used EVs can often be pretty inexpensive, and the cost of charging an EV is a lot less than the cost of purchasing gasoline, given the same miles driven. So EVs, used EVs are actually a really good solution for low-income residents who need to have a car. And I would like to think that there's a way for us to provide some of that type of parking as well. So at least until we get more EVs in the fleet, I think it's great that these chargers would actually be available to some of our lower income residents. And as we get more in the fleet, hopefully we get more charging stations. So,
Yeah, Eve.
Yeah, thanks. I have to say, I think David is making a good point here. I mean, these are regulations we can always change at some point in the future if there is more demand. Also, I thought we were putting in some EV chargers in the police area to be used more. I didn't realize that these were intended for use by municipal vehicles, but obviously municipal vehicles should take priority. So, maybe, as we need to use those charging stations for municipal vehicles, we should do that. And with regard to like inexpensive parking, I think in that area there's actually because now we're in the former township, there's actually pretty adequate parking. So I don't think it's going to be such high demand that there'll be a lot of people who will, want to park there, even for $1 a night. But, again, I think we can set out some policies, and if things are not working the way we want, we'll revise it. But I think it is great to have an option for people to charge. I mean, the two at the shopping center, when I go there in the evening, are almost always occupied. So I think there's a demand, and we should allow for that while we can, unless municipal needs oversee that.
There is a plan to add some EV charging stations in the police parking lot. That's, I would say, stage 2 of this proposal. We're not there yet because it actually requires us upgrading some electric facility within our building itself. This will be directly charged with a transformer from the street. So we do not have to upgrade our electrical facility at the building.
Okay, so just on this slide, I think we all realize that going forward, as our EV fleet expands, we'll have to find more EV stations for ourselves, and we'll have to develop internal policies so that our vehicles do not become all-day parkers at these stations either. Because with the rate of use on some of our vehicles, they surely will not need to be charged every day. So,
I will point out that at least at the very beginning, the plug-in hybrids that we're getting are for the building department, and they're mostly on the road during the day.
Yeah.
So they will probably park there at the end of the day and charge up overnight.
right, although their day ends around 3 o'clock, because they start around 7. But anyway, it's all good. It's a continuing process, so thank you. What's up
Okay,
next, Jim?
That's all I have, thank you.
That's it? Okay,
That's for me.
for you.
Got Deanna.
Okay, so we're getting into the second work session then, correct?
Yes.
And the second work session is the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, Tree Streets neighborhood, and Bank Street residential permit parking and guest permit parking work session. And Deputy Administrator, Municipal Engineer Deanna Stockton is on stage.
Thank you, Mayor. I think David captured the idea behind this as saying overnight parking has complexities. And so since consolidation, we have been working on harmonizing the permit programs for the former borough and township. Their council had a permit parking task force that was in place to review the regulations and provide recommendations. Back in March of 2022, those recommendations were then sent to staff to work through and refine and bring back to council. So that is why we are here tonight. Staff compiled a working group made up of the police department, planning department, parking, Access Princeton, clerk, administration, zoning, and health to review the recommendations and compile what you see in tonight's work session. While we haven't covered all of the topics that were covered by the permit parking task force in this presentation, we do have other recommendations that are in progress, and the intention would be to follow up at a future work session to talk about those other areas. So for tonight's work session, we will be discussing Bank Street residential permits for Witherspoon-Jackson and the Tree Streets, guest permits in Witherspoon-Jackson and the Tree Streets. As a side note, 2 new 24-hour, 7-day-a-week regulations. We do need to look at street cleaning regulations, parking enforcement, and our implementation schedule. So that's what I'm going to cover tonight. So the first program is related to Bank Street. Bank Street, as everyone should know, is located off of Nassau Street, connecting to Chambers Street. It is a residential zone with limited on-street parking and even more limited off-street parking. The residents have requested the establishment of a 24/7 residential permit parking program only. Staff support that recommendation, so what we're proposing is that only residential permit holders would be able to park on Bank Street. There would not be public parking of any duration on Bank Street. Permits would be available by lottery in keeping with the existing residential permit regulations, there would be a $10 a month fee or $120 a year for those permits. Due to the lack of parking that is available on street, there is not the ability to provide guest permits, but the street is also in proximity to 3 parking garages. So if the residents do have guests, they can utilize the parking garages. So I'll follow Jim's lead on this one, and I'll hold on this if there's any comments on Bank Street.
Okay, David and then Eve?
Yeah, so a lot of what you're proposing is also in line with what the Permit Parking Task Force recommended, so I'm happy about that. The only question that I have is for the residential permits. We've certainly considered doing it by lottery. We also considered possibly issuing more permits than there are parking spaces, because the fact is that if you only, there's like 11 spaces on that street. If you only issue 11 permits, you're going to have a bunch of empty parking spaces at certain times during the day and stuff like that. And I think that it may make sense that a permit on Bank Street does not guarantee a parking space, but entitles you to one if you can find one. And maybe it's available to every residence without off-street parking, as opposed to doing it by lottery. I'm not convinced that's the right solution, but I think it might be a better solution.
Thank you. Eve?
So a question and a comment. So how many dwelling units on Bank Street would qualify for this if we're talking about 11 spaces?
We're, I think, around 20 dwelling units that do not have off-street parking.
Okay, so yeah, we had a discussion about this earlier in the day regarding the tree streets in Witherspoon, Jackson. In that case, you'd be paying $20 a month and might not be able to find parking. So, I mean, in a sense, what David is saying makes sense, that the policy maybe should be the same. Maybe you don't give out permits to everyone, but you oversell in a sense, so 50% more, 30% more, whatever. I did want to say that if we do limit the parking on Bank Street or any other street, and there is a lottery of sorts, I do feel strongly that it should be an annual lottery and that you don't win the prize for the rest of your life and then hand it down to your descendants. So just if we do go that way, that there is some annual, if that's not going to be tremendously expensive or difficult, which maybe it would be because it would involve people turning in, or I guess the tag just expires. You have a new color, so you don't have to reclaim the tags. But anyway, just food for thought.
Thanks, Eve. Leticia and then Michelle.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is related to how you would monitor who qualifies for a permit. If I understand, some of those residences are rental units, and from what if I remember correctly, under the existing parking system, even in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, when there's rental units, the permit is issued to the homeowner. Is that correct, Dolores? Yes. So making sure how that's going to be monitored, especially if the homeowner doesn't reside here in Princeton, but the permit gets passed on to the tenant. My second question, and I'm sure we're not there yet, but I'll ask it again when we get there with permit parking in Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. Again, under the existing system, there's some residents who pay for their permits while there's others who are not required to pay. Including there's also other neighborhoods, such as the high school neighborhood, who gets permits that they don't pay. So when we're trying to harmonize in our codes, our ordinance, I just want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration and how can we possibly make permits available where some have to pay and others don't.
So noted.
Our system requires payment for all residential parking permits and guest permits, our proposed system.
Okay. I'm sorry, was that it?
Well, in that case, would that also apply to the high school neighborhood? That is a permit system.
Tonight's presentation
Right.
is
That's-
solely on these 3 neighborhoods. But yes, we are considering that. And I think
Yeah, and
it
that's why I
would
said, I
be-
know
it
it's.
would be a component of the system.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting, but that's what I meant when I said, I know it's not part of this presentation, but eventually
Yep.
it's a question that I think will be asked, not just by me, but.
Yes, there's administrative costs with all of these permit parking programs. And so while we are not proposing that we would cover all of the costs related to the program, we are levying some fee related to the use of the public right-of-way for exclusive use for parking.
And I do have an idea on that, which I would share when we get to the overnight parking permit system.
Okay, thank you. Michelle was next, and then Mia.
Yeah, I thought David's idea is really worth looking at. I don't know how we measure that or figure out whether or not that would work, but it does seem that if you only give as many permits as the lottery concept, people aren't going to be using them all the time. So, it is, I didn't realize though it's almost double the demand from what the spaces are. So that's challenging, but it did seem like that might be the way to go, at least, maybe for the first year, and then go to a lottery system, or vice versa, go to the lottery system and then monitor whether or not those spaces are being used. But it does seem, in fairness, it would be really nice not to have the lottery system. But I think that's really a good consideration. So, thanks, David, for the idea.
Okay, thank you. Mia?
Michelle, I couldn't actually hear what you were saying. I'm just wondering, are all the mics working, or could people in the audience hear?
No.
No.
Can you hear me? No?
I think the
I
trick
think
is,
I have to talk up.
you got to keep it real close to your mouth.
I don't know that your microphone is working.
All right, can you hear me now? It's just, it was the positioning. I think I had it like here. Yeah.
Okay, so we all have to talk into the microphone.
Thank you for pointing that out.
And important not to trail off as well.
I didn't say anything all that great.
Face into the microphone.
I was just concurring with my colleague David on that lottery, so.
Okay.
So unimportant.
So if you can't hear in the audience and we're talking, just interrupt us and let us know. I just want to say I understand, this issue, like so many other issues that we deal with, there are competing interests, and we are treading delicately among residents, merchants, consumers, employees, and it is impossible with any of these decisions that we make to make all of those constituencies happy or satisfied. There's limited real estate and many people who want to use those spaces. But I just want to step back for a minute and emphasize the fact that the people who want to use those spaces all want to use them for cars, and that the decisions we make have impacts for the future in terms of how car-centric we continue to be or not. And it is not sustainable for the town to continue being as car-centric as we are now, and I don't think, for a variety of reasons, that's how we want to continue. So I realize that for now we are making a concession to the Bank Street residents and to other residents who have advocated quite vigorously to have essentially, at a nominal fee, to have the town grant them parking. But I think we need to take a moment to acknowledge that the town is, in essence, adding value to their property by giving them free real estate to use for their motor vehicles. And that's a value decision. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but let's not just gloss over it and pretend that that's not what we're doing. And, you know, the center of town is a commercially focused mixed use, but that is the commercial center hub of our town. And people make decisions. They've made decisions to live there. And I think if you decide to live in a place like Bank Street or in the center of town or in the tree streets, there are tremendous benefits. There's walkability. You're living in the center of a very vibrant area, but it may be less convenient in terms of how you store your car. That's a decision you make. The town is now essentially saying, oh, we're sorry, you made the choice to live there, but now it's difficult for you to find a place for your car, so we're going to make it easy for you. For people who live slightly farther out from the center of town, that comes with inconveniences. You need to spend more on gasoline if you're going to drive to town, or you might want to buy a bike so that you can go to town. The municipality doesn't offer to buy people bikes who live farther out from the center of town to make it more convenient. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't move in the direction we are, because I think that what tonight represents a very delicately crafted compromise between a variety of constituencies who are adamant about prioritizing their needs and their needs only. So I want to urge that all of those groups think about the big picture, think about how they might be able to compromise, and think about what the decisions we're making mean for the future of transportation and circulation and land use patterns in Princeton. So.
Thank you. Layton.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree with my colleague, Mia, that we want to get less and less car-centric in the future. But I also want to just remind everyone that this initiative started 2 years ago, minimum, and a lot of work by many people have been put into this effort. We, the council, turned this effort after a couple of years over to our committed and dedicated staff and asked them to come up with a game plan. I think what they have come up with is remarkable. One, for timing. Two, for comprehensiveness. We're never going to get perfection, but we don't want good to be the enemy of perfect, as I've often heard Bernie Miller say. We have a problem on Bank Street. We have a problem on the tree streets. We have a problem in Witherspoon, Jackson. And I think that we, as members of council, owe it to the residents of these neighborhoods to alleviate and mitigate the problems that we have all recognized that they have. I think this is a good start. I think we should try it and endorse it. It's well done, it's comprehensive. We all had an opportunity to read it today. I know we still have some other work to do. One of the key things at the end of this is the questions that still need to be asked about equity here in Princeton, and how we have 3 or 4 neighborhoods that take the brunt and the hit for many other neighborhoods that should be participating. I know that's a story for another day, and it's a sore topic, but let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. Let's fix the problems that we know we have in the 3 neighborhoods and look to, with minimal, I think, changes in the plan that we've been presented, endorse it. Thank you.
Thanks, Layton. Any other comments on, I'm sorry. David and then Eve.
Thanks, Mark. I do want to respond first to Mia's comment. I totally agree. We want to move away from being as car-centric as we are, but I think the necessary first step is to have a really robust transit option in town. Once we get a municipal shuttle that really covers the town and runs every 15 minutes or so, I will feel a lot more comfortable being a little bit more draconian about parking. And by the way, I think charging more for parking permits is a great way to help cover the costs of better transit And I think that's something we should be seriously considering. But on the flip side, I do want to emphasize that on-street parking is the greenest parking that you can have. It's existing pavement, doesn't have any new construction costs, doesn't have any of the energy costs associated with new construction, building a parking garage, for instance. And we really should be, if we're thinking about sustainability, unless we have another use for this real estate that's on the street, like everybody knows, I want to get rid of parking on street when we can put in bike lanes instead, and if it's necessary to put in the bike lanes. But on a street like Bank Street, if you get rid of the parking, what else are you going to do with that space? And if we don't have a serious plan for what to do with it, it's the most sustainable solution to parking that we have in town. So I wanted to make that point. And then I wanted to go back to the very nitty-gritty issue of how to distribute, or how to choose what to do with the permits on Bank Street. I want to emphasize that right now the people who live on Bank Street are fighting for those parking spaces. They're 2-hour parking for anybody right now. So essentially people who live there can hardly ever get a parking space. And if we did something where instead of a lottery we gave a permit to every resident without a driveway, they would still be so much better off than they are right now. So you have to think in terms of the improvement over their existing circumstances rather than the ideal, right? And letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, as Leighton was saying. It's just another plug for why giving out more permits on that street makes sense to me.
Thanks, David. Eve?
I also want to express my appreciation. I think sometimes to Mia for pulling back a little bit from the nitty-gritty and the details. I think, as I was reading this over again today, it's very easy to get sucked into the details and not have the big picture of where we want to go. So Mia, thank you for keeping your eye on that. Once you give out a perk, it's very hard to take it away. Witness the high school neighborhood, which shall not be named right now, but I'm naming it anyway. So I think that one of the things that, as we move forward with this, it should be, this may not be a permanent solution. And so as we go forward with this, let's say, really consciously that this is the solution for today. But it may not be the solution for 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And, just a kind of heads up to everybody, as we go into this, as they people start to purchase their permits, to just acknowledge that this is done on a year-to-year basis, and we're not promising anything for the long term. And that may be a way to both keep the long-term kind of bird's eye view that Mia was expressing about where we want to go in terms of the high cost of free parking, and that we do want to be a less car-centric community, and also meet the needs of residents now without, as David pointed out, really an adequate public transit system, although we all hope that's going to change in the near future.
Okay. Any other comments on Bank Street? Okay, let's move on from Bank Street.
Okay, thank you. So the next slide is to provide an overview.
Excuse me, there's a couple people, attendees, that have their hands up. Do you want to call on them now or at the end, or how does that work?
I think usually we try to get through
At the
our
end?
comments on a work
Okay.
session, and then we
Thank
can.
you. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So the next slide, it provides an overview of the regulations that are proposed for the Witherspoon, Jackson, and Tree Street residential parking permits. On the next couple of pages of the slideshow, you will see the areas that are designated for each, the Witherspoon, Jackson, and the Tree Streets. But in general, what we're proposing is that the permits would be valid within the zone rather than on a specific street. The regulations currently say that you can get a permit for the street that you live on. We recommend changing that so that if you get a permit in Witherspoon Jackson, you can park on any number of streets based on where there's availability of parking. We're also looking at changing the existing regulations for unpermitted public parking. Currently, depending on where you are at in those two neighborhoods, there may be 2-hour parking, there may be 20-hour parking. The only thing that's limited is the overnight without a permit. So we're proposing that if you do not hold a permit for the neighborhood, you can park, but it's for a 3-hour time frame. It would be enforced from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that way, that better protects the residential needs of the neighborhoods. In terms of eligibility, the idea is if you do not have off-street parking, then you are eligible to get a permit. The permit would be in the form of a decal at this point, because it would permanently affix to your car to show that you require on-street parking. And again, the rate for that permit would be $10 a month. In addition to the residential permit, we would offer a guest permit. And the guest permits, again, are eligible for 24-hour parking. And this is more of a transient use, so to speak, so it would be a hang tag. And where the permit parking task force had broken down different guest usages on streets, like whether it's a contractor or an in-home caregiver or a visitor, the thinking behind this guest permit is that the property owner would have the hang tag, and depending on if they have a contractor that comes for the day or their child is home from college and needs a place to park, this hang tag would be made available to that person to utilize. It would also go at a $20 a month rate rather than just the $10 that would go for the people without off-street parking. So we would also incorporate in an ordinance a reduced rate for qualifying residents. I'm working with our municipal attorneys to determine what the qualifications are for that. Right now, by state statute, the Purple Heart holders qualify, and as long as state statute doesn't prohibit it, municipalities can create other categories that could qualify for a reduced rate. So we're still doing some work on that component of it, but the idea is if it's, whether it's low income or special housing, federal housing, whatever it may be, we are looking at different rates to accommodate those needs. So those are the general ideas that we would like to move forward in creating an ordinance for the permit parking. I don't know if you want to look at this slide and provide comments, or if I should go through the next two slides, which are more specific to Witherspoon, Jackson, and Tree Streets.
Yeah, why don't you finish the whole thing? and then
Okay,
that
sure.
might be-
So with the Tree Streets, we have included Hamilton Avenue into that zone. And the idea with that is it, one, provides additional parking spaces. When you start to look at the number of units that could potentially receive a permit, especially a guest permit, there aren't sufficient parking spaces to handle that. So we have heard that Hamilton Avenue is often very well used because it does not have a restriction for the number of hours that can be parked. So the idea is that we would establish that as a 3-hour zone, and that could provide parking for the Tree Street zone as well. And that could be viewed as a first step to managing the curbside for future bike lanes. If you wanted to think of that, that has been a recommendation for the corridor. And so this would be a first step in limiting the on-street parking to make it available for other uses. So again, as I stated, we would be looking at a $10 a month permit for those properties without off-street parking, and then properties could also acquire a second permit or a guest permit at $20 a month. And then moving on to Witherspoon Jackson, again, the same. I will point out, Witherspoon Jackson has been kind of the victim of two different codes. Birch and Lee were in the former township. They did not have a fee associated with permits for that residential area. People who live on that street can get 1 permit if they have a driveway, 2 permits if they do not have off-street parking. So this will be a change in establishing the 1 permit, well, actually in establishing the fees, essentially. And again, Clay and Lytle right now really do not have a time limit other than overnight parking, so we would establish a 3-hour time frame for those 2 streets and actually increase the other streets from 2-hour parking to 3-hour if you do not have a permit. Both of these areas, these zones would require ordinances to allow for street sweeping. Witherspoon Jackson, there's currently an ordinance already in place, and we would look to establish something similar for the tree streets. So in terms of implementation, we would be looking to bring an ordinance back as soon as the next council meeting, September 27th, with a public hearing on the 10th. There is about a month and a half time needed to get the decals and the hang tags in our hands and available for distribution. So the proposal is that we would not start a permit program until January 1st. But in the meantime, we would work with police to begin providing warnings to overnight parkers so that they are aware that changes are coming in these neighborhoods. We would also, at the direction of council, we would go into the other neighborhoods that are not included in this current round of regulation changes to remind them that there are existing overnight parking restrictions that do apply to those. And just so you can see, the 3 areas that we're talking about shown on the screen is the dark blue area, that's the tree streets. Ooh. The cyan area is the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood. The pink is Bank Street. But you have the remainder of the areas in the former borough and also into the former township where there are existing regulations related to overnight parking. And so rather than enforcing just or putting restrictions on certain neighborhoods and not others, we would include this warning and enforcement process to all of the neighborhoods if council so directs us to do that. Next steps after this would be looking, like Councilwoman Fraga said, looking at the high school zone and those areas outside of these designated parking zones like the Western District, Jugtown, and those remaining areas.
Okay, thank you. Leticia, and then Eve, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have actually quite a few questions, and I'll try to have them in order, because some of them I understand is an area that we're not focusing on yet, but they still come to mind, especially on the topic of overnight parking enforcement. It was agreed when we first started looking at a permitting system that we wanted to do away with residents having to call the police whenever they have guests to notify them that someone would be parked in front of their street and with the license plate number. And it was burdensome for the police, and I agree because it has, when we lifted the restriction enforcement during COVID, it did impact certain neighborhoods more than others. So when I agree that we should go back to enforcing it, however, we don't want to go back to where residents who will have overnight guests, that there should be something in place where they can have guests and be able to purchase permits for them. And the same, there may be, you mentioned college students, that there would be guests, 24/7 guest passes available, permits available in Tree Streets and Witherspoons. And that question, is there a reason why we couldn't also make them available in, let's say, the high school area, or even the western section, where I know we heard from residents who also had students who were home and needed a place to park. Could they, if someone's willing to pay, a resident's willing to pay the $20 a month, could we not make them available, especially if the space is not an issue? Parking on the street is not an issue. Something that has not been mentioned, or at least I didn't see as part of the presentation, is as we enforce parking and have a permitting system in place, where are employees going to park? You know, Hamilton, I know, is one of the streets where some tend to park, but there's other streets as well. So it's something that we haven't addressed yet, but we're going to need to address.
So the municipality does have an ongoing agreement with Westminster to provide employee permit parking at the lot off of Franklin. It has, I think, 190 spaces. We currently have less than 50 active permits for that lot. So that is an option. It's, you know, underutilized, and this will help create a need for that lot. We also have underutilized meters on Alexander, Franklin, and northern Witherspoon, that if there is a demand that arises, that we could switch those over to employee permit parking. So yes, there are other options both in place and that could be put in place through an ordinance process with council for employees. But the focus for staff was really to provide options for residential permit parking.
Right, because we did say that was priority.
Correct.
For the residents. But, you know, that was, as far as the underutilized parking meters, that was a recommendation from the Permit Parking Task Force, that we look at making those available for employee permit parking.
In terms of the Witherspoon and Franklin Avenue areas, we also looked at that as an extension of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood permit parking program. So if there was additional demand that that could have been incorporated into the zone, so it can go either way. It can either go towards the employee parking or expanded Witherspoon-Jackson.
Yeah, and just getting back to my original question, you know, especially if we have a timeline of when we would want to start enforcing the overnight parking restriction again, that for those that need it, we should I would like for us to consider solutions to be able to provide permit parking for those who are willing to pay for a permit.
We can reconvene the internal parking group, but at the moment, I don't see any issue of expanding the guest permits to all of the former borough areas, at least being eligible for it. We'll take a look at it in more detail, but it seems reasonable that that could be expanded to all areas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Eve, you're next.
Thanks. I want to piggyback a little bit off the conversation we were just having about overnight parking. I have strong concerns about just reimposing the structure that delineated the borough versus the township. I would like that to be more rational. For example, we see how unfair that has been in Witherspoon Jackson, that if you live on one street, you get as much free parking as you want, and half a block away, you need to pay, and it's much more limited. So I'd really like to, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier, I'd really like to see a kind of rational consideration of the different neighborhoods. Maybe there are some areas in the township that should have no overnight parking, but some in the former township, I should say, and some areas in the former borough that don't need to have the imposition of overnight parking. And then Leticia, I think, touched on a really important point, which is there has to be some way to accommodate occasional visitors if you only have room for your cars. And I don't mean to make things too complicated, but maybe somebody only needs that like 3 nights out of a year. So something that might be a little more nuanced than a $20 a month commitment for that extra permit would be helpful to think about. But again, like, just not, we're 9 years post-consolidation, and we should not be doing things on a kind of, former borough, former township. We should be looking rationally at where the need is, where overnight parking is in demand from people who we don't want them to leave their cars there because it impacts the residents, and that should really be the guideline, and hopefully the police can help with that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Eve. Michelle?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the guest parking. So, can you hear me okay? It says trade workers, in-home health. I understand that we had talked about like landscapers being exempt. What is the thought in terms of landscapers or a contractor who's coming just for the day? 3 hours may not be adequate. Would they have to get a guest permit? Has that been thought through in terms of that? Because, I mean, they probably do a rotation throughout town, so it might just be rather inconvenient. So that's my first question. I have another question pertaining to that.
We would, our position would be that the landscapers do not require a permit. Their activity is such that they are not staying in one area for very long. But in regards to a contractor, if you are doing work at your house that's half a day, then the thought is that there should be a permit applied for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And would we limit the number of times a resident is allowed to purchase a guest permit? I mean, we had talked about maybe they could do 30 days in a whole year or 60 days in a whole year. Has it been considered if there would be a limit to the number, or would it just be unlimited?
It would be, a resident could theoretically buy a 12-month guest permit. And the idea is that you would oversell in terms of that guest permit, there's no, we would not promise that a parking spot is available, but you would have the right, if a space is available, to utilize it for a guest.
Okay, thanks. Well, looking at the numbers, it looks like there's enough availability of spaces in both the Tree Streets and Witherspoon Jackson. I mean, it seems like there's quite a bit of availability over and above. You've got 15 units without off-street parking and 205 in the Tree Streets. So there's some availability there in Witherspoon Jackson as well. Am I reading that correctly?
Right, so you'd have, in the Tree Streets, you have 15 people that don't have parking. So they would take 10 of the 205 available parking spaces.
Right.
So there would be 190 parking spaces that would be available for the other, 290 people that might have a guest permit.
Okay, it seems reasonable.
I think my math is
right?
wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, and same with Witherspoon Jackson?
correct.
Okay. And would we have any restrictions on the rental units in Witherspoon Jackson or in any of our, I mean, I guess that would just be the landlord only could purchase both the guest and the resident?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. David?
Yeah, first of all, I want to praise you because I really think you've done a great job of trying to incorporate the recommendations of the task force, improve on them in certain ways. So thank you for that. The questions I have, one is about technology, and this relates to this idea of shorter-term guest permits as well, but it also relates to other aspects of convenience, things that were really popular to residents when we did our public engagement with the Permit Parking Task Force. The idea that somebody could just hop online and order a permit without having to come to the municipal offices, and for a guest permit, it could be available same day, if you had a visitor coming in for an overnight stay. And so I guess it's a question as to why you didn't consider taking advantage of some of the technology from Passport that's available for online permitting. Before you answer that, I do want to second the idea that I think devoting the underused meters to employees sort of right away is important, because while the Westminster lot can work for employees on the east side of town, in the central business district, it's really remote. And most of those underutilized meters are close to the central business district. So I think they're an important part of the solution for employees. I guess that's it for now.
Okay. So related to the technology, we have discussed utilizing technology. Part of it goes back to the theory of, do you want to rip the Band-Aid off and make all the changes at once, or ease people into it? I hope we learned a lesson from the meter replacement project. So we're trying to ease into the new regulations of keeping the application process similar to what it has been. We understand that there is the desire to have that on-demand application process, and part of it is that we are changing one of our online application processes. It won't go live until February. So we're we are investigating whether Passport would be our application platform for parking, or if we could roll it into the OpenGov platform, which will launch in February. So another reason, if this is becoming active by January 1, we really didn't have time to make that decision on the two platforms yet. So the idea is at least get this started, get all the kinks worked out of the permit program as it launches into the first quarter, and then we could transition to more of an online platform and determine if we go away from the decals and the hang tags to something else. Obviously there's that bigger question of the license plate recognition that has to be discussed at some point as well, because that really makes the online programs most efficient and effective for everyone. So yeah, we didn't want to tackle that at the same time because there were too many unresolved pieces, and we didn't want to delay. As you said, it's been 9 years that we've been working on this, so we wanted to just get it started, and then we would transition.
Okay. So I just want to jump in with two things. As I've told you before, Deanna, I've always have great ideas, right? But employee parking, I think we should really seriously consider University Place added to the list of other streets.
Mark, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Thanks, Eve. I would say that, no, I just think make sure we keep University Place in mind for possible employee parking in the future, because I just think the lower end of University Place is very underutilized. The guest permits concern me. I don't know how many people would ever need a permit for a guest that lasts a month. Typically, you have somebody come over, it's a couple nights, maybe somebody stays a week, maybe a contractor is working all day all week or 2 weeks, depending what you're having done. I just think if we sell a number of, or too many, guest permits that are good for a whole month, I think that's a recipe that might work against us, and spaces might be chewed up by vehicles that should not be there, because how are you going to in any way know that that vehicle really should be using a guest permit? So I'd be, not that I want to get into what might be other options. I'm sure your committee, which has done an excellent job so far, could continue to look at that. But I think we should probably rethink that a little bit. I'm just a little worried about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Michelle, were you putting your hand back up?
Yeah, I was going to bring something else up, but actually that brings up an interesting point in terms of the guests. We had talked about a guest permit being something like $2 or $3 or $4 a day. I forget what it was, but it actually it was more of a day pass than a monthly pass, and maybe that would also preclude that type of over purchasing. So that might be something to consider instead, just a daily rate. That would be, and then perhaps there could be, just to throw out there, and I don't want to overcomplicate this, but if there's going to be some kind of a discount program for economically disadvantaged families, then perhaps there could also be something in the way of some type of a discounted guest pass for home health care workers, something along those lines. So something to consider. Again, I don't want to overcomplicate what is really beautifully simple, because I know when you get into the weeds of it, you can get really complicated. But yeah, $20 a month may be too enticing to have an overabundance of those guest passes. So. And then the other piece I just wanted to bring up is on the employee permit, those underutilized meters. I think that would be a really good opportunity for the Princeton Business Partnership to take a look at those and see how we can work together and get employee permits out and see if those meters could be converted, and also push the Westminster parking, because I don't think that is there's a widespread knowledge that that's available. So I think it's time to get the word out on that too. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, David and then Leticia.
Yeah, and I just thought of one other thing that I have concerns about with the contractor parking. The reality is that, you know, when a big job is going on, there's often more than one contractor working on it. And if these hang tags that are guest hang tags for the homeowner are the only way to provide for contractor parking, I don't think that's going to meet that need. So, you know, all of these little nitpicky things are things that could really be helped by the technology. You know, I understand the desire to hold off on committing to that until you've had a chance to look at the two systems. I think we can get people to buy into having that rolled out a little bit later, as long as they know that we're really thinking about it. But I think that's going to be the solution to a lot of these issues. And I really want to second what Mark was saying, is that to the extent that people are using the hang tag parking, there's a big worry that people are going to start to use it for a second car, just to leave their car on the street all day. Cars, you know, basically vehicles that will be taking us up space that might be good for customer parking, could even be, well, I'll leave it at that. But I think that, you know, we don't want these hang tags to be essentially just a second resident parking pass, which they could turn into. And so having a little bit more nuanced opportunities to get shorter term parking could help avoid that.
Thank you. Leticia?
Yes, thank you. So I actually, when I read about the 24/7 guest parking, I was considering that that could serve as a second residential parking that could be used by either a household member or by a guest contractor, but it would be up to the homeowner to decide how they were going to use it. But we did, the task force did recommend single, I think it was up to 3 days, guest parking that could be purchased with a limited number of those guests temporary permits that could be purchased in a year, so they would not be abused. And as far as the concern about the hang tags and how they could be abused, I just want to point out that in the high school, residents, each household gets 4 permits, 2 decals, and 2 hang tags for free, and there's no monitoring how they're being used, the hang tags are being used. So as far as I know, it hasn't been an issue.
Right,
but in other neighborhoods,
there's
it
so
could
little
be.
demand in the high school area from other users.
Yes, but that's what I want to point out. There are inequities that I know that based on the neighborhood and what space is available, it's not going to be possible to offer what is available in one neighborhood versus another, but the disparity is really to the extreme from one to the other.
Okay. Do we have any other new comments on what we've been, oh, I'm sorry, Mia, I missed that.
I have a couple questions, and I just was taking some notes. So in terms of cost, I just want to make sure that we are recouping in our permit fees the overall cost to the municipality to administer the program. Have we done a cost analysis?
We have not.
Okay, so I would really like us to see that. I mean, it's something that I think we need to, and that would include staff time. This is something I've said before. I think, we do equity audits, sustainability audits. We also need to do, financial cost audits that include the cost of staff time for every new initiative. And I on that note, I'm aware that, you know, not everybody has the same resources to pay into a program like this. So I would be open to, you know, if we need to raise certain rates in order to cover the cost, I think we should explore the possibility of a sliding scale, which then, of course, creates more staff time. But I also think it's the humane approach to many things. I would love to see us do more sliding scales in the way we implement our municipal programs. But we really do need to see that cost analysis of the program before we move forward. Okay, then the other question was on the Hamilton corridor. So we are paying for the Westminster spots, which are, for the most part, thus far underutilized. I think the assumption now is that by closing off many of the internal spaces, the central spaces in town, and making them primarily available or more available to residents, that will then create a need for all-day employees to look elsewhere. I think that's sort of the underlying assumption, right?
Correct.
So, so then we're thinking that they will then use Westminster.
Correct.
Westminster will be more utilized. So that will be an interesting thing to see whether that assumption plays out. Hopefully it does. But so the Hamilton corridor, I was a little confused about where you're actually putting spots on Hamilton, because it does seem to me to be superfluous to be making long-term spots available on the part of Hamilton that runs adjacent to the parking lot that we are subsidizing merchant employee parking for. So are we?
So the idea is Hamilton would become part of the residential permit zone at this point, which means it would be available to a residential permit holder. If you don't hold the permit, it would have a 3-hour maximum time limit for parking. Currently, you can park unlimited except for the overnight hours. So
Okay, so it'd be residential.
correct. We're
Okay.
essentially switching the designated user from the default now, which I think is between the students and business, to residential.
Okay. And how does that work with, you know, there are ongoing perennial plans now for almost a decade by the bike committee to put bike lanes there. How does this interface with that? It's basically it's the same situation. It's just it's
a step closer in some respects because we are limiting the general use of Hamilton Avenue for parking so that it would be more specific to residential parking, and push that free employee demand elsewhere. Again, it is a paid permit for residential use, so there is some compensation towards that. We could pull Hamilton Avenue outside of the Tree Streets zone. It was mainly put in to provide a little extra parking availability on street for the Pine Street, Maple, Linden, Spruce Streets, which have more of the demand for parking.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. The gradual approach. Okay, and my final comment is just we've been dancing around the edges here of the issue of surveillance technology, and there are obviously serious concerns by residents in the town, and I know that by the same token, it would greatly simplify our need to administer these programs and probably cut down on costs. So I just want to, I think we can actually there is a path forward which involves, I think I've mentioned this before, passing a resolution that has been distributed by the ACLU, which is a commitment by the municipality to safeguard data privacy and to make sure that whatever data monitoring system that we'd be putting into place in the context of these parking programs, that we would have certain safeguards in place for not retaining the information longer than a certain amount of time, making sure that it's not, various identity issues are protected, so on. So I think that we need to move forward and pass that so that it opens the way for greater flexibility in however we want to, implement these programs. So I don't know who that, Trishka, maybe that goes to you, but let's not lose track of that. So that's all.
I'd jump in and say, the technology would be very helpful, especially with the guest permits. Because basically you could go online and say, okay, hey, Deanna's coming to visit me tonight. Boom, I'll get the permit. I just found out she's coming at 7 o'clock. I could get the permit, put it in the windshield, and I'm done. Or maybe not even need to put anything in the windshield, whatever. So anyway, I just think the technology at some point is going to make things easier. It's going to reduce our cost, and it'll just be more convenient for the public. And I think we can find a way to safeguard information. Hamilton Avenue, I'm a little worried about what we're doing there. And I think we've encompassed too broad an area to address the tree streets. I could see doing Hamilton from Chestnut to Linden, because that's like a natural extension. The tree streets are even with that area, but the areas beyond that, I think we're starting to have an impact on another goal that's not being discussed. So I would prefer, in my mind, to try to keep what we use on Hamilton to a narrower area. I think that's in our best interest at this point.
I would support that too, Mark.
I'm sorry?
I would support that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, David?
I was just going to say, I think a little bit reading between the lines, what I'm hearing Deanna say is that if we get the employees off of Hamilton and Wiggins, we may find that almost nobody is parking there. Because the reality is that the Tree Street permits are going to be used on the tree streets. There are very, very few permit holders who are going to find they can't, who live on Spruce, but find they can't find a parking spot on Spruce in this new regime. So they're parking over on Hamilton. That's going to be vanishingly rare. And so once those spots are vacant, essentially all the time, it'd be a lot easier to put in the bike lane, just take away the remaining potential to use them for parking and replace them with the bike lanes. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Right. So I don't want to get into the bike lane discussion tonight, because there's a whole bunch of other recommendations that need to happen along that entire corridor. Instead of it's not just throw in a bike lane, there's a whole bunch of other work.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm trying to suggest that we not put forth a suggestion that's going to bring up a whole bunch of debates on other topics instead of keeping it narrowly focused. That's my,
Yeah.
I want a higher level of potential of success for where we go with ordinances that we're going to introduce in the near future. And I'm worried that Hamilton being too great an area is going to work against the immediate goal. That's all.
Can I ask you to clarify that? Because I'm not sure what exactly you're worried about. I mean, if we go to 3-hour parking on the entire length of Hamilton Wiggins, what could go wrong?
Well, any number of things, but I'm not prepared to discuss that, and I'm not prepared to discuss all the other work that needs to be done on that corridor to have a bike lane at some point. And I am hoping that we do not have to get into that debate as part of what the debate will be for these ordinances at a upcoming meeting. So.
Right. I don't think we need to get into the debate.
Okay,
the question is, do we get rid of the all-day parking on Hamilton Wiggins? And I think the answer is we switch it to 3-hour parking. And then the question of whether any piece of Hamilton Wiggins is part of the tree streets, I think is really a moot point. It's not going to even come up.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
That's why we all share our thoughts. All right, so I'll get to you in 1 sec, but I do think it's 9 o'clock, so we should just try to come to an end on any comments, so we can get to the rest of the agenda. No, I'm just saying agenda. Michelle has her hand up.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, I know Hamilton has 80 spots, so I'm assuming that the 52 is on the south side of Hamilton, if that's what we're talking about.
There's only parking on the south side of the road.
Okay.
And
Some of it's on Wiggins. There's 12 on Wiggins.
Okay.
Right.
And about 50 odd spots on the remaining.
52.
Okay, so we don't have to decide right now, but that would be something that I think I'd also like to take back and look at that as we're looking at employee parking and, where exactly that's, that will be located, so.
Wait, are you saying you want to allow all-day parking on Hamilton Wiggins?
No, I do think that the 3-hour makes sense. I'm just wondering if that's all of Hamilton or part of Hamilton, because I thought there were 80 spots, and we're talking about 52. So we don't have to debate it right now, but I would like to see exactly
Okay,
what
but
we're
I
talking
just want to point out, if we had all-day parking, free parking, that
about. It won't move to
just screws
Westminster.
up the entire system, right? So
Yeah.
either you're talking about, selling employee permits on Hamilton, which I think I heard someone say they wouldn't support because it's taken away potential customers from the Westminster lot, but
I think converting the parking meters, we need to look at that. That's a really good solution. So,
Can't hear you.
Michelle can't hear you.
sorry, I'm like, converting the parking spaces, the parking meters could be a really good solution too. So I just think we need to look at it holistically. And I do agree that, we will sell more Westminster parking if there's more limit to that. I'm just not sure how much of Hamilton we were talking about, that's all.
so it sounds like the direction so far on Hamilton is Chestnut to Linden, so it would be reduced from the numbers on the slide.
Okay,
And I don't know the exact number of spaces within that section.
all right.
But-
Well, we can look at that.
just to be clear, then are we talking about the stretch from Moore to Chestnut, which currently is all-day free parking, not being changed? And that will be the only all-day free parking anywhere in the former borough, essentially. Not anywhere. There are a few places that,
Well, with council's direction, we could do an ordinance that just changes that to 3-hour parking.
Right.
Instead of the all-day parking.
Right.
I mean, and then it's not tied to being part of a permit program.
right.
If that is council's direction, we can draft an ordinance for that.
That would be,
Right, I just think we need to pay attention to what are the unintended consequences of not fully thinking out everything. I know we have Westminster Choir College parking lot for employee parking. I think we need to come up with something for employee parking on the other end of town,
Right.
whether it's University Place or some of the other roads you mentioned, because at some point, we're just going to be pushing these people into streets that now we're going to have residents coming and saying, all of a sudden, a different street is blocked up. So I just want to make sure we think things out enough and we have a comprehensive enough plan, so. But anyway, we're obviously going to have the same debate again when the ordinance is introduced, or somewhat similar, so that's fine. We've prepped ourselves for that. Anything new and exciting that we want to say about the presentation, or I just want to see if anybody from the public has any suggestions related to this?
we do have some hands up.
Okay. So, I'm sorry. If you want to, sure, we'll do the room first. Come on up to the podium. Just state your name and address, and the timer should click in magically and pressure you to be succinct. Is that on? Can somebody check that?
Good evening.
There you go.
My
Thank you.
name is Francis Boyer. I live at 194 Birch Avenue. And I sat this evening trying to understand this parking situation. I've been living here all my life, so I can't imagine that I have friends over and I got to get a parking permit for them to spend 3 or 4 hours with me at my home. I understand parking is a problem during the day, but in the evening, you got to come up with a better solution than charging somebody to come visit me. I go to New York and visit friends. I don't have to pay to park on the street to go visit. I'll come to Princeton. Like I say, oh, you guys can only stay with me 3 hours because after that, they're going to charge me $10 per car on the street. I think we can do better than that. And secondly, if you're going to implement parking permits in Princeton, you should implement it throughout the whole town. So if I live on a great road and I want to have friends over, they can only park on the street for 3 hours, and after that, they got to pay too. You can't make a certain neighborhood be responsible to pay for parking, and then on the other side of town, they don't have to pay. Something's not right with that. And I don't come to meetings that often, but I think I need to get down here to listen about what's going on in the town, that after a while, as a 4th-generation Princetonian, I won't be able to live here anymore. I literally won't be able to live here. And I know some people say, I don't care if you have to live here. Things change and you got to just move on. And maybe that's what it is. But that's a sad picture when it comes to people who've been here a long time, and they're going to be squeezed out because you're going to charge me $20 for somebody to come spend the night. Now, what I do now is when my girlfriend comes from somewhere else, I put my car on the street because I have a parking permit, and she parks in the driveway to keep from calling down the township and asking for parking permission. I was a police dispatcher for almost 10 years in this town. I did sit there and say, where you parking at and where you at? I can't see that it was a problem even then. So I just want the people who make it, I just want, I don't think this is any better.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's with others, but I'm not sure. I think they can hear me fine. But I'm just saying, I'm sitting here saying, you know, is this going to happen in other parts of town? We're going to get to it later, you know? You got to do it all at one time. Because it's unfair. It really is unfair to say, well, I live on Birch Avenue. I got to pay parking permission, but over near the high school and other parts of town, they don't have to, we haven't got to them yet. Well, if you can't get to them all at one time, you can't. And I'm sure people in the community would have an issue with that. I wonder how many besides Mr. Newland live in the neighborhood would have to deal with that situation. I don't have parties that often, so it's not a big deal as far as a party, but I'm just saying if I do decide to have a cookout in the summertime, when it gets dark at 9 o'clock, and you invite people at 3:30 in the afternoon, do I have to say, hey, everybody, you got the party's over because it's after 9 o'clock? Is that what you're telling me? That's what I'm looking at to do?
Right, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
We're not, but I just do want to say one thing. We're not looking to do things to force people out of town. I totally agree with you that that is not, that's not a goal of this group.
If we're that poor of a town and we got to charge for everything, something's wrong.
I also want to point out, I mean, you're lucky enough to live right next door to the community park tennis court parking lot, which is free for however long your friends want to come and stay. So, you know, whereas somebody who lives on Green Street, one of your neighbors, you know, they really have something to complain about. But I think that in your case, this is really not going to be that hard for you.
Well,
it's going to be a few steps for your friends to.
I was under the impression that anywhere in Princeton you park, you got to pay it. You telling me that I can have something and everybody can park in community park parking lot, even overnight, then really, you're right. I don't really have much of an issue. But I was under the impression that when you come into Princeton, you park, that you're going to have to pay.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify, currently the township regulations are that it's only 2-hour parking if you don't have a permit. And so by our change, we would be increasing that to 3 hours without a permit.
Thank you. Okay, so Adam, I see we have a number of hands up from people coming in over Zoom, so if we could bring the first person in. And just for people coming in over Zoom, if you could state your name and address and watch the 3-minute timer. Thanks. Okay. Tony's coming in first. Hi, Tony. All right, I can only see the timer, so I can't see the... all right, Tony, I know you're not muted. If you're there, can you say something? All right, Adam, let's go to the next person, please. Okay, so the person listed as FX, if you could unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay, FX, one more time. We cannot unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. All right, Adam, let's try the next person. They might have been here for different topics or what, well, yeah, fallen asleep or. Okay, Josh?
I'm here.
There-
You hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you, Josh. Thank you.
Okay, just so you know, on Zoom we could hear the other two people who were there. So you might want to go back to them.
Okay.
But I just want to say this is a great start and it should be applauded. A few comments and questions. First, I live on Moore Street in the high school zone the last 21 years. And, you know, there have been numerous times when high school students have had free reign to park on Moore and adjacent streets, and they've often swamped the streets. And with the Franklin Avenue development, you know, I'm wondering what the long-term plan is for high school student parking. Many of whom, even with that Franklin Avenue parking lot, still park on Franklin Avenue during school hours, especially around Sigmund Park in Westminster. They'll fill up easily, you know, 2.5 blocks during school hours. And, you know, I'm curious what in the grand scheme of this prevents high school students from getting a guest permit pass in the area that they don't necessarily live in. So that's one question. Guest parking issues around the holidays are usually the biggest issues. In the past, visitors, Thanksgiving, around Christmas, you know, the Jewish holidays have gotten tickets, and you know, it's more than just kids home from school. So I'm curious about those type of situations. Westminster parking lot is a good idea for that part of town, but it's too far from a lot of places in town, as was mentioned. And finally, you know, I think that the comments about using an app or technology are really important. And I'm curious why we're not using the Park Princeton app. Yeah, it was a lot of pushback when it started, but people are using it now and use it a lot. And why not use something we have, or at least maybe if you're looking to long-term parking, you know, use the Princeton Junction app that they have. You know, those are two apps that people in Princeton use quite often, and maybe a way to successfully jumpstart this into, you know, and, you know, don't go back to hang tags, don't go back to stickers, all that. Just use an app. Everyone does it these days. And it should be, there should be a path to do that expeditiously. Thank you. And I'm done.
Thanks, Josh. All right, Adam, who's next?
Okay, should we try Tony again?
Okay, sure. Let's do that. Hopefully we can hear them this time. All right, Tony, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you for moving ahead with the Bank Street. I live at 13 Bank Street. And what I find fairly interesting is today we couldn't find a parking space. We have an overnight parking permit, but there was no space parking on Bank Street. And so clearly we went over to the Chambers Street lot, and you probably realize that the Chambers Street lot now is completely full. I mean, we have a hard time finding a parking space over there, although we did find one. So the faster this begins to move ahead, obviously, the better off it's going to be. Really some interesting question that there seems to be 5 or 6 homeowners, that is people who live permanently on the street. And I know that Mia's issue is an important one. And to that respect, we have last week donated our second car for Cars to Kids. So we've now got rid of one car to begin to make that point. But it seems to me that the people who are the homeowners on the street, somehow or another, and I don't mean to push this, but should get some level of priority. For instance, the house next door to me, who has 6 girls, undergraduate Princeton students living, have no cars at all. And so the majority of the buildings on the street that don't have parking are essentially rented to students. So I keep wondering about, for instance, if the lottery happened and the 6 people who are on the street, who live on the street, have cars on the street and have overnight parking permits, somehow or another weren't, selected in this lottery, then what do we do? So that's a serious question I have on one part. But the second one is that I really do think that, moving ahead with this as soon as possible would obviously be something that we would all really appreciate. So those are my 2 comments on that, and keep up the good work.
Tony, thank you very much. All right, Adam, who's next?
Excuse me, Mayor. What is Tony's last name? He didn't say. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'll try to keep better, crack that whip a little more. All right, Adam, do we have?
Okay, next is JM.
Okay. And again, just as people come on, if you could say your full name, that would be really great.
Hey. Hi, it's Jack Morrison. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, Jack, we can. Thank you.
Good. Perfect. Thank you. And how are you, Letitia and David? We were part of the permit task force for 3 years. I said we should have a reunion soon, and here it is. As you know, I own and operate Nassau Street Seafood and the Blue Point Grill, and that's why I'm speaking tonight for the Tree Streets. Our buildings down there were erected in 1920, so they're over 100 years old, and with no parking at all. They're 0 lot line buildings. And the premise was basically that the employees and the customers and the residents would all share in the parking on the streets. We're all taxpayers. I'd like to be mindful of that. And it's been an issue. And as we study the neighborhood to maintain that vibrancy that Mia alluded to, because many people are down there because they are close to town. They like the little vibe that we have at our end of town. That the best way to approach our limited parking resources, was to share it. And that's why I would hope that we continue to understand that vein as we look. It's critical that we obviously have customer parking for our customers. It's also very helpful, and I would almost say critical, that employees can park somewhere within proximity of where they work. The Westminster lot for us, the Westminster lot is it's up on Franklin. So it's up by the high school and the middle school. It's a little over a half a mile to get there. And for myself, I've walked it. It's about 22 minutes. It's a little tough to add 44 minutes onto for people that commute, say from Ewing or wherever they are, and then park up there, rain or shine, walk down to our office or any other offices and stores that are around there. The idea of a guest permit was another one that we took great time to sit and discuss. And I agree with the council questions about limiting it to a guest permit. The idea that a resident, as David knows, as we all know, we have a lot of stacked driveways up and down Pine Street, not as much on Spruce Street, a little bit on Maple, but the stacked driveway for $20, the cost of 2 Whoppers and a big drink and a French fry, could literally park their car out on the street 24/7 out of convenience. I certainly, if that was an option to me, I would pay that $20. So let's keenly be aware, if it's an additional parking permit pass and not for guests, or it has opening to be abused, I really would urge this, because we have great concern, again, with our limited resources down and our tree streets.
Jack.
Yeah.
You're wrapping up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, you're out of time.
I'm running out of time. Okay, real quick. Engineering students put the big burden on the area. When the university was closed, we had a nice, quiet, everybody was able to exist down there collectively. And I would encourage everybody to look at every angle of this issue from every taxpayer's standpoint. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Adam, do we have? That's everybody then, right? Yeah, sure. Hey, Adam, why don't we click on FX and just see if that person's still out there?
Okay, bringing over FX.
All right, who's ever logged in as FX, we're trying to bring you in again. If you could unmute yourself. Going once, going twice. Okay, thanks, Adam. All right, so I think we've discussed this quite a bit, and I'm sure that it's clear as mud as to exactly what to do next, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry? Yes.
I do, picking up a little bit on what Jack Morrison was saying, and I hadn't really thought through, in most of the town are evening parking restrictions, you know, aside from overnight parking, end at 9 o'clock. So I'm wondering why in this area is it to make sure that residents coming home at the end of the day have parking, and if the parking ends at 9, then you have a if the parking does end at 9, then you have people going to a late dinner, parking up, taking, was that the concern? Because this would be different than what you have, you know, in other areas of town.
Yes, so we were proposing to have the 3-hour parking stay in place until 11 p.m. That would be to protect the the residential permit holders a little bit more. It's also part of the regulation from the former township. For Birch and Lee, they also had that same time frame. The borough had more or less restrictive times, like you said, where it ended at 6.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to, we have a ordinance introduction, ordinance 2022-32, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing 1-hour free parking in the Spring Street Municipal Parking Garage 7 days per week, and free parking on certain holidays during the Witherspoon Street Improvements Phase 1. Public hearing, September 27th, 2022. Is there a motion on that? Michelle's got the motion, David's got the second. Okay, roll call vote?
Ms. Perone Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs,
Yes.
Mr. Newland.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, we're down to our resolutions list. I'd like to take number 11 first, since we have 2 people sitting in the audience here specifically for number 11, which is 22-330, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton approving deer management services agreement with John Sampini / Suburban Deer Management Association for bow hunting on public lands during the 2022-2023 fall permit and winter bow hunting seasons.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
It's to Jeff. I thought we were going to be exploring some alternatives to this. So I'm just wondering if you can maybe give a little bit of context.
Sure. So the bow hunting is a separate portion from what we had discussed for the non-lethal options. That will be, and Trishka, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in 2 weeks we're reviewing that. So this is bow hunting, which is separate from that agreement with White Buffalo.
So this is not part of the White Buffalo program?
No.
This is not the net and bolt,
No, this
Right.
is bow hunting through John Zampini. It's just separate than the White Buffalo portion, which is part of the community-based deer management application with DEP.
Jeff, I'm so sorry because I can barely hear you, and I'm thinking that people who are watching probably can't hear either.
All right, so I'll explain some of it. Trishka can probably fill in some of the rest. But the DEP permit for community-based deer management has two main components. One is bow hunting, and then the other has to do with the White Buffalo contract. James Ferry, our animal control officer, has been in lengthy discussions with White Buffalo and has requested a proposal for a non-lethal option for White Buffalo this season. That agreement is most likely going to be on the agenda in 2 weeks. This agreement is the bow hunting portion of it, which is part of the overarching DEP permit.
Right, so I'm just, sorry, just to help, this part is really mandatory for the state process in order to move ahead with the next step. Because if we don't, my understanding was if we don't do this, then we're likely not to get approval to do whatever it is we're going to do with White Buffalo.
My mic is not cooperating. Yes and no. I mean, it's never been stated that way outright, but the state's preference is definitely for municipalities or counties to rely on traditional means of hunting to control the deer. So the bow hunting, it's actually just a small correction. We actually don't need any kind of special permitting from the DEP for that aspect of the deer management program. It's really just considered recreational hunting following traditional, state hunting laws. Given that that's where they want public entities placing their reliance, they will allow municipalities to use the alternate means, in our case, White Buffalo, but that's really intended to be like a backup or a supplement to traditional hunting. So in effect, is it a quid pro quo? Yes, but they wouldn't ever state it quite that way.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I don't fully understand, and it may not be necessary for me to fully understand right now, but just to place this in some context, after, last year I had asked for a full review of this program to ensure that there were no other possible options, and we were assured that there were no other possible options. We received a great deal of mail from across the state from various people who were extremely, who characterized Princeton's approach to deer management as barbaric and dated, and some of the accusations were a little over the top, but it did seem that there was some credence. We then heard from former state senator or assemblyman Ray Lesniak, who said that, and who runs some sort of institute, and it seems that in fact, and Jeff can maybe elaborate on this, that there is the possibility, if there is a certain state law that is amended, to actually move towards, birth control. I don't know if that's what it's called for deer, but whatever.
Contraception.
So I'm very excited about that. and it had been my sense all along that where there's a will, there's a way, and that Princeton should have the most humane approach possible. I think people's concern in particular was for something called
The net and bolting.
the net and bolt. So I was very excited in the past 2 weeks to hear that we were going to be moving away from, or moving toward a more humane approach. So again, Jeff, I'm sorry, if you can just sort of explain where we are and what we're voting for, and assure at least me, and hopefully my colleagues as well, that we're moving towards a more humane approach.
So if you'll allow me, I actually suggested to Jeff that I sort of take his place in the hot seat momentarily. But I think the answer to your basic question is, yes, we had made that commitment. And I think as Jeff would have said, but I'll just jump in, Jim Ferry has actually been really diligently pursuing all summer long, really actively exploring non-lethal options. And Jim is here tonight. Jeff and I specifically wanted him to be here so that he could talk to you guys about what he's been looking into, and what role non-lethal management, what role those methods will play in the overall program. Again, the big caveat being we do need some changes in state law. I know that there is legislation that has been introduced at long last. It's something I've been hoping for years, so I'm actually really happy to see that something like that may be moving forward. But I think it would be really helpful for the council to just, Mayor, obviously it's up to you, but I do think Jim has some good information that he could impart that
Well, we could, yeah, I mean, we could entertain the discussion, or we could just understand that when the contract for White Buffalo comes up, hopefully at the next council meeting, the whole discussion about non-lethal, i.e. sterilization techniques, will be part of that discussion then. So we'd end up having the discussion tonight and again at the next meeting or the meeting thereafter. But, I mean, the only reason I know this is I happened to corner Jimmy earlier today, our animal control officer, and he gave me the lowdown on this. So, but if we
I'm totally fine waiting.
But I do think the short answer, just to reassure all of the council members, was no one on the staff side, I mean, they've made good to that commitment. And Jim in particular, I know, has put in a great deal of work on this. And, so whether it's tonight or at the next meeting, I do think there's a lot of information he'll be able to share with you guys that'll be helpful.
Okay. And Jeff, thank you, and Jim, so much for your work on this. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Other questions on that? Eve, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mia, for this. I think, as everyone has said, this will be taken up when we talk about the White Buffalo contract, which this would be initially a pilot program so that it would supplement but not replace the lethal methods, but that can be adjusted over time as we see how successful the pilot would be, again, assuming that the state law gets changed. Without that change, we simply, can't act because of the.
I'm not sure if it's a change or is it just an interpretation. It seems that it's there. It might not be that the state law needs to change, but that there's a clarification on how it's interpreted.
I'll defer to Trishka on that one. I thought it was an actual change, but.
It's probably an interpretation, but sometimes the only way to deal with those is for the legislature to speak through legislation.
Well, hopefully I think changing one's interpretation is an expedited path. So I hope we can advocate for that at the state level.
Okay. I'm sorry, Eve, did you have?
The only other point I was going to make is I believe that there's two resolutions having to do with the deer hunt tonight, and I would just ask that both of them the other one also get moved up so that Jim can go home after this rather than stay till the bitter end.
Thanks for pointing that out. We'll get to that one
All
next then. Thank you. All right, any other questions on 22-330 for the bow hunting? All right. I think that was moved and seconded, was it?
No.
No, sorry. Is there a motion?
Oh.
David's got the motion, Eve's got the second. Okay, if there's no further questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, one abstention, thank you. All right,
And then Mayor, Resolution 22331.
yep, resolution.
If we could take that up next.
That's correct. Resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing a consulting services agreement with Stewart Green LLC to conduct an aerial deer population survey at a not-to-exceed cost of $15,000. Is there a motion on that one? And Eves gets the motion this time, you get the second.
I'm
Questions on the motion? And I believe Mr. Ferry, our Animal Control Officer, would say this is a much better way to do to try to figure out what the deer population is as opposed to driving around and pointing spotlights at deer in the middle of the night.
400,000 foot candles was it? I've never heard of such a thing.
Okay, no questions? I'm sorry.
Well, can you explain what it is? Can you give an explanation?
Jimmy, why don't you come up, and you're here, so you might as well say something. I want you to leave here feeling fulfilled.
What should I answer first?
Can you answer the question about what exactly is the aerial deer population survey?
So Stewart Green provides drones that will fly the entire township, basically. They recently did a study at the university, and the final report was very impressive. The technology has gotten a lot better over the last few years. They're able to discern, raccoon versus what a deer looks like on infrared camera. It really gives you a bird's eye view. It gives you hard data of, how many deer, and also where they're located. When we do our density estimates, it's all by spotlight. Most of our towns and road, there's not a lot of open space between roads, so when they do their spotlight surveys, the confidence is high in the amount of deer that they count. This will be a very nice way to get a bird's eye view of that. It's also a separate company besides White Buffalo, who also does, our deer call and our deer count. So from my standpoint, that makes a lot of sense to have a third party do our counts. We are penciled in for December 2nd. Hopefully all the leaves will be off the trees by then. That's the most important thing. Good cold weather is important as well. And I think that's pretty much it. I've never seen one done before, so I'll be attached to their hip during the whole process and really see how it goes. But the university has done it. They're going to do another flight soon, I believe. Other large towns like Alexandria, Virginia, has hired them to do their counts, so they're pretty reputable.
Thanks, Jimmy. Any other questions?
And the point of that is basically that would lay the foundation for moving towards a more humane option, because it would give us a sense of what we're dealing with.
Right, so when we do our spotlight surveys, we're not driving down Hodge Road. We're not driving through some of the really populated areas because we've never had access there before with any other methods. So this will give us an idea as far as what the scope of the non-lethal measures would be, because we really don't know. So there's a lot in limbo this year about what we hope to learn from this flight and adjust our project from there.
Okay, and I also just wanted to add one more thing, which is that we really learned a lot from the people around the state who wrote to us, and issues related to Lyme and accidents, car accidents, which are one of the reasons why Princeton undertook this program. I think. Going with lethal methods is not necessarily the most effective way to combat those two, which are real threats. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this and Princeton hopefully leading the way for the state in effectively, combating those issues, but also in a more humane way. So,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
could definitely say that we're the best in the state. Multiple towns call us every year and ask us how we do it. For us to get more tools in our toolbox is always a good thing, and applying the technology that's available to us to get accurate data, including going forward, just to touch on it slightly, we have coming down the pike some forest studies. We want to understand a little bit better what 22 years of deer management looks like in a 18 square mile ecosystem. So that's going to be interesting. The other important thing is that this will be my 6th program, and our deer vehicle collisions from just last year are already down 40%. We haven't even gotten over 40 dead deer on roadway this year, which is 40% less than last year. When I first started to get to our magical 30 deer per square mile, which we're at right now, we were able to get that within 5 years. Going into 6th year, it's important to keep management efforts as hardy as possible. John, who's here tonight, which you guys are deciding as well, is the bow hunting piece, which is step 1, like we said before, but without knowing exactly how the white buffalo portion is going to pan out, we need to get John started because the season's only so long, and access and everything. The overall state of the program is very, very good. We've gone from our deer harvest totals of 250 to 300 down to 100 this year. That's what we're hoping to achieve as far as harvest data goes. That's not counting the non-lethals. Again, we don't know what our populations look like in those zones yet. And what I tell everybody is we're kind of at a cruising altitude right now. As simple management, the cost of the program has dropped quite a bit because of the amount of effort that's needed to keep the deer population in check.
So Jim, I don't mean to interrupt, but we have a motion on the floor to talk about the aerial survey, so we should.
I tend to babble, I'm sorry.
Zero back, yeah. Because you're going to be saying all the exact same stuff in
That's
2
true.
years.
That's fair. Okay.
With all due respect.
Yes.
Okay, other questions related to this? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Jimmy, thank you for all your excellent work.
Thank you.
Okay, Resolution 22-320, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing a professional services agreement with T&M Associates in the not-to-exceed amount of $8,700 for the purpose of submitting groundwater sampling data for years 2019 through 2022 to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for the landfill located at 298 River Road. Is there a motion on that?
Sure.
Thank you. Michelle was the quickest. Eve's got the second. Questions on the motion? All right, seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Ayes have it. 22-321, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton rejecting bid for the purchase of one high water rescue truck. So, coming out of first of all, is there a motion? Let me ask that first. Leighton was quickest, and Leticia, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm trying to look at the screen
I
and see who's
see,
putting
yeah.
their hands up, and it's kind of reversed. So now I'm getting confused. So I go to look to that side, and it's a different set of people.
If you weren't dyslexic when we started, you will be
I
by
will
the
be
end.
when I'm done. It might have helped me. But anyway, coming out of IDA, we made this kind of a high priority to get this because it's clear we need this type of vehicle. But in going with only one vendor that was responding to our request for this vehicle, there were a lot of hiccups as far as warranties, and the cost just went up dramatically. So our Director of Emergency Management is actually reaching out to a couple other vendors, and this will come back to us at some point in the future. Just a lot of background. Hopefully that wasn't too much. Anyway, other questions on that one?
No.
All right, if not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that was everybody. Thank you. 22-322, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing purchase of a Murakami Wi-Fi access points from DyneTech Services, Inc., under state contract M7000, Data Communications Products and Services, 21-TELE-01506, not to exceed $20,632.99. David's got the motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Michelle. Questions on the motion? Mia?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if at some point we can have an update on how we're doing with our overall IT overhaul. Not tonight, but at some point it would be good to have that.
Not a problem. Any other questions on the motion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, that was everybody. 22323, a resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the execution of the license agreement with GP&J Owner LLC for the Graduate Hotel project. Is there a motion? Thank you, David. I'm sorry. Oh, Layton's got the motion, David's got the second, and this is for signage, canopies, and things like that that stick out into the right-of-way from the building. Questions on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 22-324, a resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract under a national cooperative purchasing agreement for the purchase of a 2022 Ford Escape SE plug-in hybrid from National Auto Fleet Group, not to exceed $39,348.36. Is there, Leticia's got the motion. Is there a second? David's got the second. Questions on the motion? I would just like to make a comment when it comes to vehicles. I do not get the sense yet that we have done all we can to move away from department-specific vehicles and go to more of a carpooling type of atmosphere for our vehicles. So I'm just making a comment. I'm not in any way suggesting we don't approve this, but I really think we need to make progress on changing the culture on how we use vehicles around here. Questions on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that's everybody. 22-325, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to Cherry Valley Tractor Sales using the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey, ESCNY, co-op number 65 MCES-CCPS, for the purchase of one New Holland C332 high-flow compact track loader with attachments for the Department of Public Works in the amount of $98,467.52. Is there a motion on that?
Sure.
Thank you, Eve, and David's got the second. Questions on the motion?
I think you should start singing these.
Say that again?
I think you should start singing these.
Yeah.
There's kind of a rhythm to it.
You really don't want me to do that, trust me.
It's not a question, it's just, that is such a steep price. I guess it just is what it is. And we just
I think, you know, it's interesting to note, though, I'm glad you said something, right? Because all this equipment is really expensive now. But I think if we look at what we do with our mechanic shop, well, maybe that's not the right word, but the crew that really takes care of our equipment, the longevity of some of the equipment is really much longer than the typical useful life. So, I mean, I think it's pretty amazing the change in the abilities that we have in-house to maintain our equipment and the job they do. And part of that, I guess the other hand, is that we actually have people that say, let's go out and buy quality equipment and let's not buy junk that's, you know, in 5 years we're replacing again. So,
Yeah. Are we looking, I would recommend that if we don't urgently need to purchase things, given the supply chain issues, which is hiking up all the prices, I'm hoping and assuming that we're not purchasing things unless we absolutely need to. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to extend the life of the vehicles, but at a certain point, the repair costs get so high that we need to retire those vehicles and replace them.
Thanks.
yeah. Other questions? Michelle?
I know I might be jinxing this, but, you know, the past couple of years, we really haven't used a lot of those snow plows that we purchased. I think they were like $250,000 each. We bought a few of them, so I might be jinxing it by saying it, but, you know, climate change may be changing the types of equipment that we need, so, but I'm sure you're aware of that. Anyway, I think we have a sand dome sitting there and a lot of snow plows, so we'll see, but you never know. We might have a bad one this year.
Yeah, I think, again, on some of these pieces of equipment, when you read the detail in the memos that we have from engineering or in Public Works, I mean, some of the equipment is probably borderline unsafe that we're replacing with the amount of rust and other damage that we've put up with for a while. But
Yeah, everything seemed to be well beyond its normal useful lifespan and rusted, and, you know, the descriptions were a little harrowing, so safety first.
Yeah, and some equipment has been delayed for purchasing. I think probably the meeting before this one, there were pieces of equipment that had been approved in a capital budget 2 years ago that we were just now moving ahead with resolutions to purchase. So they're definitely looking at the fleet and seeing what we can delay when needed.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, Leighton, did you have a?
Yeah, Mayor, I just had a thought that it might be good for both council and public when we have purchases in the $100,000, $90,000+ range, that maybe we attach with it the useful life of the equipment, because $100,000 over 12 years is more palatable than just $100,000 with a piece of equipment. I think would be helpful for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 22326, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to Performance Trailers, Inc. for the purchase of a 2023 haul-about 8.5-foot by 20-foot enclosed landscape trailer in the not-to-exceed amount of $16,000. Is there a motion on that? Eve, thank you. Is there a second? Michelle's got the second. Thank you very much. Questions on the motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
This one's a bargain.
22327, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to GT Mid-Atlantic LLC via the Sourcewell contract number 032-119-CNH for the purchase of one Case 590 Super N loader backhoe for the sewer department in the amount of $149,850. Is there a motion on that? Thank you, David. Leighton's got the second. Questions on the motion? I think if you vote for it, you get to drive it one day. I'm not sure. All right. No questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 22-328, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to GT Mid-Atlantic LLC using Sourcewell contract number 32119-CNH for the purchase of one Case 621G wheel loader for the Department of Public Works in the amount of $230,520. This is the real big machine they see driving around town picking up piles of brush and everything like that. Yeah. Is there a motion on that one? Thank you, Michelle. Is there a second? Thank you, David. Questions on the motion?
And, you know, this one talks about the life expectancy too, that it's been, 12 years and it's rusted cab.
It's hard to...
I said it has a rusted cab, it talks about this, having extended past its life expectancy. It's a big expense, and I think, our brush and leaf program is expensive.
Yeah, well, we have complicated, complex, large equipment, so.
Yeah.
All right, no other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 22-329, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing the adoption of a prototypical service agreement. Is there a motion on that one? I had to look this up in the agenda to figure out what it was, and now I forgot, so I got to go back in a second. But Leticia, thanks for making the motion. Is there a second? And then we'll dive in here to the detail. David's got the second, and let's see who gets to it first. Sorry, I'm going by pictures of the trailer at the moment. Who remembers what this is? It surprised me what it was. The name didn't.
This is what's required by the Department of Community Services, I think?
Yes, and it deals with the deferred compensation.
That's what it
Deferred
was.
comp, and there was one company that had it, they assigned it to another company, so now we're adopting a resolution accepting that second company to handle that aspect of the deferred compensation.
There you go. Thank you. I knew that a few hours ago, but I forgot it. Okay. Other questions on this motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We did 11 and 12. 13 is 22-332, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton authorizing Princeton Public Schools to undertake Sunday construction work at Little Brook Elementary School and Community Park Elementary School to complete roofing projects prior to the winter. Is there a, Leighton, thank you. Is there, David's got the second. Anyway, this is something that if we don't let them to do it, it's probably going to cause huge problems. Any questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm sorry, I do have a question. What will be done, I guess, Jim, Deanna, this is a question for you. What will be, or I guess not, maybe it's who makes sure that people in the neighborhood are notified? Because this is the big change in policy that we have Sunday construction, and I do think it's important that the neighborhood, people who live in the area of the schools be informed of this so that we don't get a flurry of calls about how, the school is, and not everybody who lives in the neighborhood of the school has kids in the school. So just, if we can make that happen, that would be great.
We'll work with Princeton Public Schools to make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Okay, right, so we'll make sure the schools undertake that responsibility. Okay, all in favor? Oh, we already voted, sorry, that's right, my bad.
I was late.
Yep. All right, so we pulled number 2 under the consent agenda up to this section of the meeting. That's Resolution 22-334. It's a resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing an agreement with Stewart Green LLC in the not-to-exceed amount of $15,210 to perform meadow monitoring services and create an adaptive meadow management plan at Greenway Meadows. Is there a motion on that? David, thank you. Eve's got the second. Questions or comments on the motion? David?
Yeah, I just wanted to, both Eve and I had requested that this be moved out of the consent agenda because it's really an interesting program. What they're doing is actually surveying the meadow to identify locations where there are invasive species versus healthy native plants, and they'll be putting together a management plan to eventually try to get rid of the invasives. And it's a model program that is kind of work that will need to be done for other natural areas under municipal management. And so we thought it was worth going into it a little bit.
Yes, Eve.
And I'll just chime in as well that this is really a model of what we want to be doing, both as private property owners and as a municipality. Start to think. There's a book, the name is escaping me, but who, the author, very well respected, argues that, the solution to climate change is everybody making these small changes in their backyards, in the properties that they control. And here is, an opportunity for us to walk the walk, that match the talk that we've been doing about sustainability. So I really do think this is, very symbolic, and I guess David and I had the same reaction, is that this deserved to be highlighted. And I also want to, show some appreciation for our open space manager, Cindy Taylor, who I think is coming on a year, or is it over a year, but anyway, just really has enabled us to have the resources to care for our open spaces in a way that we haven't had before, and given us some room to introduce innovative programs. And other staff members, I'm sure, were involved in this as well. So just some appreciation for a great step in the right direction.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All right, next up is the consent agenda. So there'd be 5 items on the consent agenda if somebody wants to move that. Thank you, Leticia. Mia's got the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. David?
I would move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Eve, yes, Eve's got the, sorry. Again, I did the, oh, Eve's got the second. All in favor,
Feels-
please say aye.
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 All right, we're done. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Feels
Our
so
first meeting
different
was a
doing it in
success.
person.
Yeah, yeah. Jeez.